Live from the Clarity from Chaos studios, heard worldwide, it's Dave Campbell. On every episode, Dave and his guests explore, discuss, and work on solutions to some of life's biggest challenges. So, if you're ready, be prepared to be enlightened, amused, and even shocked by what you hear. And now, the real, the authentic, the one and only Dave Campbell.
Welcome, and thank you for listening to Clarity from Chaos. I'm your host, Dave Campbell. If you're a first-time listener to the show and like what we're doing here, go out to my website on Substack and hit the subscribe button to support the show. The site address is clarityfromchaos, all one word, .substack.com. Also, while you're on the website, use the About tab at the top ribbon to see who the upcoming guests will be. We have a terrific guest on this episode of Clarity, but first I want to talk about the need for us as a country to become a lot more spiritual. Modern day propaganda has everyone convinced that they are the center of the universe and what they want or don't want is all that is important. Everything revolves around the individual. Basic right and wrong does not enter the discussion if it doesn't fit the individual's paradigm. This brainwashing has been going on now for over 50 years and has now infected several generations. We're at the point that an intervention is needed. That intervention is represented by first recognizing the ongoing effort to destroy Christianity in this country. Second, to reacquaint yourself with the church and the Bible. We need to come together and have faith in God and his ability to combat this evil that we see around us. Belief is what's needed. Discard your negative thoughts and develop positive ones, and you will see a change in yourself and the people around you. We are incredibly pleased to welcome back to Clarity the author of the best-selling book for Christ and Country, The Martyrdom of Charlie Kirk, Mr. Drew Allen. Drew is a writer, political commentator, and publicist whose client list includes some of the most influential conservative voices in America. One of those clients was Charlie Kirk. He hosts the Drew Allen Show, known nationally as the Millennial Minister of Truth, and where he delivers fearless commentary on faith, culture, and politics. Welcome to the show, Drew.
Hey, David. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure, my friend. My pleasure. So what I'd like to start out talking about is this whole concept of evil and its rise in our country. And it just seems to be popping out everywhere. It's kind of like playing whack-a-mole. You just can't stop it. Now it's in Minneapolis. Several months ago it was in Washington, D.C. and Chicago and Los Angeles. And it just goes on. And quite frankly, a lot of the evil and the hateful rhetoric, I believe, led to Charlie's death. So, what's going on? What's going on, Drew?
Well, I think it's important first to establish a definition about what evil is,
Yeah.
and what sin is.
Yeah.
And it's disobedience to God.
Yeah.
And that's what we're seeing on the left. It absolutely controls their ideology. There is not a single policy, not a single thought that comes from the left that is in alignment with Scripture and the eternal truths that have been given us, obviously, through that wonderful book, the Bible. In this book, I'm very explicit. I say that the left killed Charlie Kirk, and that's not to say that they collectively pulled the trigger. One person pulled the trigger,
Right.
but he was killed in an environment that was created by the left, an environment in which the left's political enemies could be dehumanized to the point where such an event could be imaginable. And Charlie Kirk was kind of the culmination of that effort because it was a successful assassination attempt. We have seen years and years, frankly, starting with 2016. I can trace this in my personal life, David. I don't know if you can. I'm sure some people in your audience can relate to this.
Yeah.
But look, just about me, I'm 38. I grew up in Dallas, Texas. I grew up in liberal environments, despite being raised in the church and by conservative parents. I went to high school, an all-male college preparatory school in Dallas called Jesuit Dallas. And every single friend and professor, teacher, I guess they're teachers, not professors yet, but every teacher and friend I had at that school was left-leaning. And they always knew that I was right-leaning. That's important to understand because all of my childhood friends, and I mean, think about in your own lives, that bond, if you loved your high school. I loved my high school. It was one of the greatest experiences and times in my life. And it was an all-male college prep school, which is significant because there was no drama. You get really close to guys, just like you do on sports teams when you go to a
Right.
school like that. These were just my brothers. Nothing could separate us. 2016, the left starts the escalation of their rhetoric about Donald Trump. 2016, I voted for Trump. I was an outspoken Trump guy. My friends stayed with me. 4 years later in 2020, because of the COVID insanity, which exacerbated the divide and the division that the left was already creating with the Trump hatred, it was on steroids. You know, Trump was Hitler. He was a fascist by then, a Nazi. And therefore, if you supported him, you were guilty by association. You too were a Nazi. So those friends that stuck with me in 2016, lifelong friends that always knew I was right-leaning, they cursed me out in 2020. They excommunicated me. I do not have a single friend left from that high school. Every single person that was in my wedding in 2017 is no longer friends with me. They don't talk to me. Okay? So my point is, maybe other people had that experience. You should not have ignored that experience because it says something about the danger of the left-wing ideology that they can separate a personal experience that cements only one thing in their mind, that you're a wonderful, valuable human being and contributor to their lives, and you can just sever the cord immediately like that.
Yep.
And that's what happened by 2020. And it is not 2020 anymore. It is 2026. Escalation of the rhetoric, the dehumanization has not stopped. It's only gotten worse. They've doubled down on it. And after a while, it's over.
Yeah.
And we're getting very, very close to that point in this country where the left collectively kind of just glazes over and they become the zombies that they've become, which is, bloodthirsty for our demise.
Well, yeah, it's like I said in the opening, Drew, the propaganda has been onslaught and continuous for, I would say, at least 40 plus years. I remember I got involved in politics back when Goldwater was running. I was young, but I remember the moment that they did the nuclear blast with the little girl and the dandelion as a commercial. And that was the end of Goldwater's campaign right there, because, he had a vice president at that point that was very militarily aggressive, and they pinned the end of the world basically on Goldwater. And that's my remembrance of the propaganda starting, and it's been ongoing in increments ever since. Now it has ramped up. It started ramping up, I believe, in 16 because Trump was a challenge to the good old boy network that has been running this country for the last 100 years. Because this whole rise of socialism has been ongoing since Wilson. It's been incrementally coming every little bit. And then with Obama, it got put on steroids. And people don't really understand this whole situation. I'm just going to talk about it here in a minute in Minneapolis. That's all Obama's architecture. He brought those people in from Africa and planted them in Minnesota for a reason. And the reason we're now seeing, what baffles the hell out of me is the fact that they've been literally pickpocketing the people of Minnesota and stealing their money, their tax dollars, for years. And now they're in the streets protesting the very legitimate individuals trying to capture the bad actors, not even the people that committed the fraud, the other bad actors, the rapists, the murderers, and so on and so forth, and get them out of Minneapolis's society. And they're rioting over it. It's just incredible to me. But that shows you how deep the propaganda has gone. I mean, the taproot to this propaganda is all the way to the soles of their feet now.
Yeah, and the Democrat Party and the left is untethered from morality, right? They believe in moral relativism. So the perfect thing is, and I played this on my show recently, there's a clip that someone else created that goes back and starts at 2014 with Barack Obama talking about illegal immigration.
Right.
And he sounds exactly like Trump. And Hillary Clinton sounds exactly like Trump. And Bill Clinton sounds exactly like Trump. And this is where they were just a short while ago.
Right.
And what people have to understand is the reason they've changed their tune, just like they changed their tune on abortion and anything else, is because it's all about power for them. Right. And what people have to understand too is that, the protests against ICE in Minneapolis and elsewhere, it's not about ICE.
No.
It is about keeping these illegal immigrants in this country because There's historic precedent for this. You know, Black Americans used to vote overwhelmingly for Republicans right up until basically, through the 1920s. And then you had a Great Depression. And that's where it started to shift because
Right.
Black Americans felt the pain of that depression even worse than white Americans did. And they pinned the blame on, well, Herbert Hoover was president. And that was the last time Blacks overwhelmingly supported a Republican. And so if you fast forward to the Civil Rights Movement and, the 1960s, obviously, I'm talking about here in the late 50s, the left made a concerted effort. The Democrat Party made a concerted effort. And this is documented in history books, conversations with Democrats who are obviously white racists that established a new plan. And that plan was that if they could convince basically the entire block of Black Americans to support the Democrat Party and abandon the Republican Party, they could win elections in perpetuity. And that's what Lyndon B. Johnson, said. I'll have those N-words voting for me for the next X amount of years. And that's what we've got. And of course, Black Americans have suffered worse than they did, frankly. And the left would call this controversial because they are ignorant of history. But Blacks were better off before the Civil Rights Movement than they are today in terms of their own prosperity.
Absolutely.
And so it's gotten worse. And so my point is now you're at a point where, you've seen a lot of Black Americans who turned out to support Trump. They're not unilaterally and universally supporting Democrats anymore. And they're wisening up and they're saying we've been bamboozled. So the Democrats now obviously are looking to import new voters to support them. And this is what is so outrageous about the Democrats. And I hope Democrats out there, if any Democrat is listening, you will listen to me and take this to heart. If the Democrats were decent, moral human beings, they weren't simply devoted to the pursuit of their own power. Their policies are harming American citizens. That is not debatable. And instead of changing their policies to address the needs of their voter base who are turning against them, they are instead looking to the third world to import new people to replace you. That's replacement theory. They're not replacing me, baby. I don't support them to begin with. They're replacing you. And that's what replacement theory is. It's a strategy. It's not a conspiracy theory.
Yep. No, I completely agree. I think that, and you brought up an interesting point about the Blacks being worse off now. The whole concept of racism 20 years ago was slowly sunsetting itself. And now all of a sudden it's back in the forefront. Now, why is that? It's just like the whole war. And you brought up LBJ. LBJ was the one that established the laws in the IRS against the church being able to preach from the pulpit, preach politics from the pulpit, because it would violate the IRS code, and they would become taxable. So that basically stifled the communication from the pulpit. So that minimized the church, because you can go back to COVID right now, and there were a few pastors that went to jail over keeping their churches open during COVID, but the majority of the churches in this country shut down, just like everybody else. So the manipulation here is across the board, and it's pervasive, and it's purposeful, and I no longer even look at Democrat and Republican kinds of things. To me, it is now boiled down to good and evil. And what's going on now is the rise of evil in this country. And you see it coming out of the mouths of Democrats. You even see it coming out of the mouths of some Republicans. That's what's going on now. And unless people understand and start to rise up in some kind of meaningful way and hold these people accountable, I'm not quite sure where we're going to go with this, Drew.
Yeah, so what needs to happen is everyday average lay people, Americans, need to make sure that they vocally support Trump's efforts right now. The left is engaged in not only a physical war with ICE, but also a propaganda war to convince you that these monsters need to be stopped. That's what they would call ICE, right? Who are doing their jobs.
Right.
The monsters, of course, are the people that ICE is arresting and apprehending and deporting. What needs to happen is repercussions. And it's going to get worse because it's the left that escalates. Just like the Renee Good situation,
right.
They escalate and it leads to violence. And their response is not restraint afterwards. The response is not to have some introspection and look for ways to de-escalate.
They double down.
They double down. They double down because they want violence, and the more violence, the better, because then they blame the other side. And it's just this whole vicious cycle in which they can recruit more additional people to commit acts of violence, and it never ends. The way
Well,
it
it's
ends is,
it's like Kent State, Drew.
yeah,
People it hasn't even been brought up in the conversation, but the whole thing just smells of Kent State, right? Where they got they got in the face of the guard, and something like that's going to happen in mass, where it gets unleashed, and somebody's going to have no choice but to defend themselves.
look, the Democrat Party and the politicians that have been pushing and encouraging people to protest ICE and get in their faces and put their bodies between ICE and criminals, they're responsible for what happened to Renee Good. Renee Good is
Yeah,
also responsible for what happened to her. But had the Democrat Party not created these circumstances under which these lunatics believed it was permissible to violate the law and play these sorts of games that were very serious, this wouldn't be happening. And this stuff is not happening in every city. It's happening in these sanctuary cities and sanctuary states. The fact it's happening in places where the local politicians and state politicians have basically ordered their states not to engage with or collaborate with ICE when they come in.
right.
And so it's created a powder keg. And I want to be clear, and I hope people get upset by this. The Democrat Party was foaming at the mouth for a Renee Good to be killed. They exploit these deaths for this purpose. And they knew very well that if you're going to train people, because Renee Good was trained in protesting ICE, this is a Marxist tactic. She was trained for this. And these people should all be put in prison and prosecuted who are training individuals to obstruct a federal law enforcement agency from doing their job. And that's how far we have to go in this, which is lawful and legal. And there's going to be immense pushback, and CNN's going to scream about tyranny and scream about fascism and scream whatever like they always do, but it has to be done.
I completely agree. Let's talk about your book, Drew, and your relationship with Charlie. I found it intriguing, and I think unfortunately Charlie's death, some of the positive of it, I think brought the realization to the conversation that you or I are having right now about the rise of evil and what needs to be done about it. Charlie was on the front line discussing this for well ahead of the curve.
Yeah, Charlie was fearless. He was, completely courageous. I didn't even realize how important he was until he died, and his death, which is a tribute to him, actually, he's become even bigger and more important than he was while he lived, and
Right.
that's a testament to how much he accomplished and his conviction and his influence on this world. And it was felt on a global scale. I cried for a week after he died, and it's still hard to talk about. And I wasn't friends with Charlie. I've been the publicist for a lot of famous people, and frankly, if any of those other people had been killed, even like Charlie, it wouldn't have affected me in the same way because, for one, Charlie, even for me, who was a little bit older than him, I'm 38. He was 31, about to turn 32. He had a 3-year-old daughter and a 1-year-old son. Dave, I was my oldest, who's about to turn 3. Well, into March, she's going to turn 3. She goes to like a preschool at a Montessori school, and I work from home and I work a lot like a dog, and so I don't typically pick her up from school. And the day before Charlie Kirk's assassination, or that morning, my wife mentioned that the day before when she went to pick her up, she was very disappointed because she was coming to the car, looking into the car, saying, Dad in car. And my mom said, no. I mean, my wife said, no, he's not in the car. He's at home. And so that day, 9:10, I decided to go with my wife to pick up my daughter because I didn't want her to be disappointed. I wanted her to see me and see her, face light up.
Sure.
And we pulled into the parking lot and parked, and I got the notification. And then a bunch of messages came in from people in that world and friends telling me that Charlie Kirk had been shot. And my wife went to get our daughter, and I was refreshing my feed, and then I came across the video, and I knew in my gut that he was not going to survive and hadn't survived. And as I was realizing that and processing that Charlie Kirk was killed, my daughter comes running to the car, and she just has the biggest smile on her face, and she's just, yelling with
Yeah.
joy, Dad, Dad's in the car. And that was the duality that set me on this course to write the book, because it was just it was too close to home, right? Like,
Yeah.
that could have been me, that could have been other people. And I sat at the breakfast table the next morning, and my little daughter, my almost 3-year-old, touched me with her little oatmeal hand, and I just broke down in tears. And she asked my wife, is Dad okay? Dad has an ouchie. And my wife said, yeah, he's got an ouchie in his heart. And it was just looking around me at my situation and realizing that there's another family, the Kirk family, and that dad's gone. Charlie's gone. And it never should have happened. And there was never a national reckoning for it happening. It didn't take place. Instead, we had conspiracies about the Jews killing Charlie Kirk, or, trap doors, or, an exploding lavalier, lava Mike. It was, Brigitte Macron's, non-existent penis killed him. I was just so disgusting and repulsive. And I thought that we had a moment there where we were going to actually talk about this stuff nationally, and hold the left accountable.
Yeah, but we didn't. We didn't. And, we fiddle farted around and finally got our hands around the individual that did the heinous act. But I don't know that I'm confident that, well, I would say, that the Almighty will take care of it, but I'm not sure that I've been reading some stuff on the trial and stuff like that, and it just doesn't, to me, it just doesn't seem as cut and dried and justice will be served as it needs to be. And again, the whole conversation around this, the one we started out with, the one we're talking about now, is the hateful rhetoric and the manipulation of public attitude and the whole culture thing hasn't really happened. It's happened to a small extent in small isolated pockets, but not on a national level.
No, I mean, look what's going on in Minneapolis right now.
Right.
I mean, they're trying to turn Renee Good into the white female version of Michael Brown. For people who don't remember, under the Obama administration, to your point earlier about him wrecking everything, basically, it all starting with him. Michael Brown was said to be, a promising young athlete who was, set to go forth and have some NFL career after, playing some college ball. And he was an innocent young black man.
Right.
And this cop in Ferguson, Missouri, shot him while his hands were up because he was just a racist cop. And that was the narrative the left told us. And then that's where the refrain, hands up, don't shoot, came from. But of course, it turned out that was bullcrap. The young man had assaulted the cop through the front, through the driver's side window of the car, and tried to take the officer's pistol from him. And the officer shot him in self-defense. And the left didn't change their narrative. They didn't apologize. The media didn't offer any sort of course correction. They still use that as justification for riots. And you could say the same thing about George Floyd, but you go to Renee Good and it's the same situation. You can watch the video that is from the officer's phone that shows him, and you can hear it, him getting hit by the car. No, we know that it's not his fault. Legally, he's absolutely protected and defended himself. And yet the left will still tell you that she was just some innocent mom that had dropped her 6-year-old off from school.
Right.
And she was just murdered because, ICE officers are evil, the devil themselves. And so this dehumanization of ICE continues. And, look, a week after Charlie Kirk was assassinated, you had a copycat attempt in Dallas, Texas, where some guy tried to snipe, a bunch of ICE officers and he missed. But, look, whether you look at that instance or Charlie Kirk and the transgender connection of, that indoctrination in that world of hatred, if you look at transgender examples too of violence, Audrey Hale in Nashville that killed students at Covenant School. If you look at the one a week before Charlie Kirk died, when a transgender person shot up kids sitting in the pews at mass and killed 2 kids. Audrey Hale and that other trans shooter, by the way, if you read their manifestos, and I talk about this in the book, they read like a Barack Obama speech. They read like a Joe Biden speech. They read like a panel you watch every night on CNN about race and everything else.
Right.
The point is, the left's rhetoric is leading to violence. And I am sick and tired of that conversation not happening, because you have a bunch of wimps in prominent places that don't want to go where I take people in this book, which is to say, let's compare 9/10 to 9/11. Let's look at the jihadists and the Muslims in Pakistan who were celebrating in the street, handing out candy to kids after thousands of Americans were slaughtered on the worst day of terrorism in our history. And then you go to 9/10, Charlie Kirk's assassination, and forget if you believe that, the Jews killed Charlie Kirk or whatever your weird belief is out there. Look at the reaction. The left was celebrating his assassination, from prominent Democrats to people I went to high school with, Dave, and it was widespread. There's a cancer in this country, and it's violent, and it needs to be stopped.
Yeah, and I guess what worries me, Drew, is does the majority of the people in this country have the will to stop it? And the reason I bring that up is I was watching some news clips and I saw this lady basically attack one of the independent journalists that was on the street. And I mean, she physically assaulted him. She was coming at him, left throwing swings and everything else. And an individual asked me, what would I do? And I said, if she started throwing her fists and everything else, I'd drop her right there on the spot. Well, she's a woman. I said, so what? That doesn't mean she has any more right to do what she's doing than I do. If I'm standing there, she has no right to try to assault me, right? And I'll act accordingly. And my fear is we're not going to act accordingly. And I have all the admiration in the world for Trump, and I believe he's going to do everything he can to do the right thing. But I don't know that he's going to get the backing that he needs, Drew, to do that. Because right now, as far as I'm concerned, they ought to be driving in water cannons and dousing all of those crowds with water and watching them freeze. Because I guarantee you, at 10 o'clock at night in Minneapolis, if they're doused with water, it's not going to be a comfortable thing. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to posit something from what you were describing that I can't prove definitively right now, but my eyes and instincts tell me it's happening. There's something curious about the majority of these protesters that are involved in the ICE protest to me, and that is that their sex is female.
Yeah.
I don't think it's accidental. I think that it's intentional because you cannot elicit the same emotional response if you see a big grown man attacking an ICE agent. But if you put women up to that task, and I would love to have a journalist go in and look at the training program that Renee Good was going to in Minneapolis and
Yeah.
find out how many women versus men were involved in that training. I would love to get those training materials, my hands on those materials too, because it is women who are doing this and getting their faces. And they're lunatics nonetheless, but the
Right.
media is able to elicit. I mean, look at Renee Good. She's just a mom
Soccer
of a
mom.
6-year-old,
Yeah.
soccer
Yeah.
mom,
Yeah. Yep.
just like
Yeah.
the illegal, what's his name? Abrego Garcia was just,
Just a nice
Maryland,
dad
the
from,
Maryland
yeah,
man, the Maryland
just a
dad or
nice
whatever.
dad from Baltimore. Yeah, absolutely. Nice dad from Baltimore. Just don't look in the van with all the people I've got stuffed in there. Yeah. And I agree with you completely. It's purposeful. Somebody with a lot of money and organizations behind this,
Soros is one of them. I know that for a fact.
and they need to get their hands around him and draw him up by the thumbs. I'm sorry, I've no patience at all for what he has done, i.e., the DAs in this country and everything else, and his money. Um, for the life of me, I don't understand why he's not locked up, and why the toleration for him, because we've been talking about Soros putting his hand in this pie now for several years, and now he's got his son involved in it, and I don't understand the reluctance behind going after him.
Yeah, we've always kind of been this way, unfortunately. We've got to change
Yeah,
our tune and toughen up. I mean, look, if you look at January 6th, which was not an insurrection at all, and you look at the reaction from the left to that in terms of prosecutions, right? How aggressive they were. They were going after these groups like Proud Boys and everything else, people that weren't even, I mean, Enrico Tarrio is the best example, the leader of, I think, the Proud Boys. He wasn't even at the Capitol at the time, but they designated them basically, domestic terrorist organizations, and that's how they prosecuted them. For what? For organizing to go and protest. So you mean to tell me that we're not willing to go after somebody who's actually funding Antifa, funding BLM riots, funding insurrection, actual insurrection in our
right.
states? And by the way, Minneapolis and Minnesota, Governor Tim Walz, the crook who hopefully will be prosecuted and go to prison for his involvement with a fraud with the Somali community, and then the mayor, Jacob Frey, these guys are out there actively. I mean, look, I wasn't there. This might surprise people. I was not there for the start of the Civil War in Fort Sumter, but this is a very, very similar circumstance right now that's taking place in Minnesota, and it's been going on for a while in places like Chicago, where you have increasing calls from Democrats to disobey, obviously, the supremacy clause of the Constitution. Because, I don't want to go on a whole history tangent here. I'd love to impress people, but I'm not. But, the Civil War, obviously, everyone talks about slavery and the North versus the South. But the specific thing that caused the Civil War was Abraham Lincoln, believed that he had an obligation, of course, to hold this union together. And so it was because he wasn't going to allow the left to secede, the Democrat Party and the Confederacy to secede from the Union. Slavery and all that stuff's important and relevant, but fundamentally, it was started because Abraham Lincoln believed secession was not possible under the Constitution. And so you effectively have these Democrat-run cities and sanctuary states that are operating from a very similar Confederate principle right now, which is, look, they declared war on ICE. They said, I think Tim Walz phrased it as a question. We've never been at war with the federal government before, or something like that, or federal authorities. So they're calling that shot. And so the point is, when you make the correct decision and take the right course of action in this case, which is to put that insurrection down, they're going to use that incident, no matter what happens, to inflame.
Yeah.
So you just have to be ready for it and expect it.
Yeah. Well, I think we're fortunate for one thing, and that's having Trump in the White House and having the cabinet and the people that he picked to support his agenda in the White House, because I can't think of any scenario with any previous president that they just wouldn't have taken a knee and been done with it, right? They would have bowed to whatever's going on. And fortunately, Trump's not going to take a knee. And not only domestically, he's not taking a knee internationally either, which, is much consternation on the Dem side as well. So your thoughts around how do we turn the Queen Mary, Drew? Because to me, there needs to be an intervention. We need to put something in the waters to start deprogramming these idiots. But and I don't mean just because they have a difference of opinion. That's one thing. Having a difference of opinion is great. Being able to articulate your differences from my differences and whatever is great. What's going on now? It's just pure evil. And other than God, I don't know any other way to get at it. I don't know how to, suck this silliness out of their heads.
People have told me that, and I don't know that they're wrong. There's no demonstrable way to prove it, but we wouldn't have won the 2024 presidential election without Charlie Kirk and what he was doing around the country in these college campuses and whatnot. I think without a doubt, you can say he was influential.
Yep, I do
And
too.
I guess, people aren't going to like my advice because it requires something of them. But I will just speak briefly about the transformation that I've experienced since Charlie died. I'm not and wasn't necessarily tepid before Charlie Kirk died, but I did not seek out debate. I didn't want to be in uncomfortable situations, and maybe, I just wasn't ready. There's Drew before Charlie died, Dave, and there's Drew after Charlie died. And it's a difference that I can mark. It's a difference that has stayed with me. I'm a different human being talking to you now than I was the last time I was on your show. And it happened very quickly, because the first thing is this: I'm a Christian. I'm a conservative, I'm a father, and I'm a husband. I did not put my faith first. Now, I'm not a bad guy. I'm loyal to my family. I love my wife. I take care of them. But I was pretty deeply unfulfilled and unhappy a lot of the time. And I have since put my faith first. I put God first, my relationship with Christ, and I have buried my head in my Bible like I have not done since I was a young man, a young kid even. And it's making profound changes in my life. Now, people should ask themselves, why was Charlie Kirk able to go into these hostile environments and debate like he did? And if you watch him do it, he wasn't angry. Charlie Kirk loved debating people. That's what separated Charlie Kirk from like everyone else on the planet, is he loved it. He didn't need a Candy Crowley there to bail him out like Barack Obama did in the debate with Mitt Romney, but he relished it. He did it because he had conviction. He was able to do that because he prepared. And I hate to tell you this, those of you listening and watching, you want to be a conservative in this country, you want to be a Christian in this country, it requires sacrifice. And that sacrifice is, instead of turning on Netflix, instead of playing games on your computers, you need to open up books. You need to think about how to debate these people. You need to start to understand history. You need to formulate strong arguments in defense of the truth. And from that study, you will have what Charlie Kirk had, which is conviction and courage that is based upon your strong belief system, your confidence, because you have been forged in fire. The left is lazy. They can go out and lie about Renee Good. They can lie about every issue in the world, and they don't ever have to have any facts because they can't have facts because the facts prove that their arguments are incorrect. And so it's on you and me to buck up, start putting faith first if you're a Christian, become a Bible-based Christian. If you're a Christian out there, and I counted myself in this category, if some guy walked up to you or gal walked up to you in some coffee shop and wanted to find Christ, could you bring that person to Christ? And for me, Dave, the answer I had to say to myself after Charlie's death, looking in the mirror, was I couldn't do it. I would lose that person because I believe in Jesus, but I am not equipped to do it. And that is a failure. A failure. And the same is true if you want to save this country. So, look, I've got more energy, Dave, than I've ever had before. I get up at 4:30 now. I'm doing my podcast, trying to get to 5 days a week while being a full-time publicist. I've got 2 books written. Another one's coming out in March about Trump-Russia collusion, using the declassified Tulsi Gabbard stuff. And yeah, I get tired. Yeah, I have hard times. But there's an energy that I have that is supernatural. And it has to do with putting my faith first, because I just have a fire that didn't exist before. Every day was a slog, Dave. Every day was a slog, man. Even doing PR and everything else, I was just tired and tired and tired. And now there just aren't enough hours in the day. I want more. I want to sleep less.
Yep. I truly believe what you've just said, Drew, is the answer. My hope is people are willing to go down that path, because to me, that's the only path that's going to get them there is right there. They cannot take this. Well, we don't want to, if you don't agree with this, don't even say anything, because you don't merit, you have to be able to articulate your views and stand your ground. And that's basically what it comes down to. And to me, the church needs to put their big boy pants back on and start railing from the pulpit the things that we're talking about, and start connecting the dots for people and encouraging people to move down that path as well.
Yeah, if you go to a church and you don't feel uncomfortable, you need to find a new church.
Yeah, exactly. That's been my point for quite some time now, and I agree with you completely, because you should be feeling uncomfortable and challenged every time you sit there and listen to the sermon. There should be something in there that grabs you by the elbows and shakes you a little bit. So
yeah. We don't go to church to affirm our sin. We go there to be challenged.
No, and don't, and it's not a political event. It's not a business event or anything else. It's far deeper than that. It's far, far deeper than that. People need to reacquaint themselves with it. Where do people find your book, bud?
Well, I'm proud to report that the month-long censorship campaign on Amazon has ended, and they can now buy it on Amazon.
All right.
I guess that says something that they didn't want people to read it. But
yeah.
So Amazon, it's also available Walmart, Target, bookshop.org, other places if they look for it. But Amazon's the best place because, it gives visibility, and, more books give you more,
Well, it's a message that needs to be out there. People need to read it. People need to understand what you've put on paper, Drew. So we've been talking to Drew Allen, who's the author of the new book, For Christ and Country, The Martyrdom of Charlie Kirk. And as always, my friend, it's been a tremendous pleasure. It's just sitting down and talking to you. Gets my motor running, buddy. Gets my motor running.
Wish you were my neighbor, man. You want to move out to California?
No, I used to live there a long time ago, but I wouldn't give you 2 hoots for what's going on out there now, man. I'm thinking about going back to Colorado, but they're boogering it up as well. But I'd love to have you as a neighbor.
I know. It'd be fun. We could have these conversations
Oh
off
my
camera,
goodness. Oh my goodness. Drive the wives crazy, wouldn't it?
That's right. I'd never get anything done.
Listen, my friend, take care, and we'll put our heads together again as soon as we can.
God bless you, brother. Thank you.
Take care, my friend.
Thank you for listening. If you would like to listen to more Clarity from Chaos shows on demand, go to clarityfromchaos.buzzsprout.com or send Dave an email at info@clarityfromchaos.com for information on previous shows. You can also listen to the show on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Twitter, or Google Podcast. Until next time, please remember, it's not about waiting for the storm to pass. It's about learning to dance in the rain. Be well, everyone.